Welcome, everyone. This is Lindsay Taviran and my partner.
Hi, I'm Cecilia Isaac.
We are the founders of F-BOM.com. That's F-BOM.com. It stands for Feminist Book of the Month. And we are so excited today to be interviewing our second F-BOM author, Intisar Khanani, because right now we are featuring her book, Sunbolt, which is just book one of the Sunbolt Chronicles. She'll tell us a little bit more about some of her upcoming releases today, but we'll mostly be focusing on Sunbolt and then her path as a writer. Cecilia, do you want to kick things off by telling us a little bit about Intisar and then what we'll be talking about?
Yep, we found Intisar on a Reddit list of self-published authors and looked her up and actually stumbled upon her book Thorn, which we'll talk a little bit about later, and ultimately went with Sunbolt to be our featured book of the month. And we also have on the back half of Sunbolt is the Shadow Thief, the exclusive short story that Intisar wrote for us. So Intisar, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself, about Thorn, about Sunbolt, and then we'll go into questions.
Sure. So I have been writing since I was a kid, and I kicked off my writing career in 2012, when indie publishing was kind of gaining ground as a force to be reckoned with in the publishing world. And at that time, I had a nearly there version of Thorn, and I'd been shopping it around to agents for a couple of years and didn't get any bites. So I decided to just go ahead and share it with readers via indie publishing. And the last 5 years have been a wonderful ride, learning to publish, which is its own trick, and then writing and sharing my stories. Sunbolt was the next project that I took on, and it features a street thief with a troublesome sense of honor, if you will. And Hitomi has been grand fun to write. She's kind of the problem and the solution all wrapped up in one package. So I'm really excited to be here. I'm very honored to have been chosen as an F-BOM author. What can I answer for you?
Well, first, we are honored that you are working with us.
Yeah.
Because it has been such a pleasure. And the excuse to read both Thorn and Sunbolt, since we couldn't ultimately use Thorn due to your publishing deal, wasn't any burden on our part.
Yeah. So the first question I have here is a classic that I think all readers want to know when they talk to authors, but where do your ideas come from? I know that Thorn being a fairy tale retelling has an obvious source, but we have Sunbolt taking place in these 11 kingdoms that are all distinct from each other. So how do you come up with those cities and cultures?
Sunbolt was a really interesting experience for me to write. It was a story that I started, and I had about 5 or 10 pages of it, and I didn't have any idea where it was going or what it was about, and it just ended very abruptly. I thought it was a short story for the longest time. I thought it would be like 5,000 or 6,000 words. And then when I was overseas with my in-laws, I stayed up every night with my father-in-law, who was battling terminal cancer, and I picked up this story, and Sunbolt, the novella, and the following 2 stories just came pouring out of me. So it came as a struggle to maintain my sanity and a place to find balance. And I didn't. It wasn't a planned story per se. I had maybe 2 paragraphs on what I thought the whole huge story arc was about. So I think with me, a lot of my ideas, some of my stories are very planned. I have, I want to write a story about a girl who is this and she does that, and this is the resolution, and I sit down and I make an outline and I write the story, and it's still exciting because it never writes to plan. But I consciously come up with the story ideas. Sunbolt was awesome because I really didn't. I knew who my main character was. I knew I wanted to write a story set in a world as diverse as our own. I wanted to center a heroine who had a heritage similarly complex to my own, where I was raised as a third culture kid. I was born of one culture, I had a heritage of another culture, and I was living in another culture altogether. And you have a sense of never being at home and yet being everywhere, being home at the same time. And that's Hitomi in many ways. So I wanted a story that spoke to uh, the girl in each of us who is searching for her place in the world. And Sunbolt kind of came out of a place of need, a sense of wanting to create a world like our own instead of the standard European medieval trope that we tend to expect in fantasy. And as I said, just finding a release in a very difficult time for myself. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really powerful story, especially creating the media that you weren't seeing, basically. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a common theme we've been finding, even just as we look for other authors and read other stories, is that there's a reason that it feels so groundbreaking, because it's just so rare, unfortunately, to find the not tropey middle, what's the word I'm looking for? Medieval, knight in shining armor, damsel in distress story. Right. Basically.
Yeah. So I guess another writing question for you. Do you have a favorite character to write then? Is Hitomi your favorite, or do you have some side characters that you like?
Oh, that's a great question. I love writing Hitomi, but I think possibly my favorite character of all is Rei, and she's the heroine of a short story that was out for a little while. It's called The Bone Knife. Some of you may have read it. And she's this wonderful combination of, being both practical, and she's a very dry sense of humor, and she's very strong, except when she's very vulnerable. And she is also, she's kind of the non-standard heroine in that she's not the pretty daughter. She's not the daughter with all the magical abilities. She's like the responsible older sister. And I love her strength of will and her commitment to her family, and her sense of humor. She just cracks me up. She's also really interesting to write because she was the first character I attempted to write with a disability. She has what we might term a clubfoot, and it was eye-opening for me, and very meaningful for me to develop her story and get to know her as a character and get to understand what her experience in the world might be like. So I'm really excited. I am working, right now I'm outlining a companion novel to Thorn that will feature Rei. So I'm really excited to get to talk with her and watch her grow and develop.
I am super excited to hear there's a sequel to Thorn, because it ends in a way that is, I think, a little bit unsatisfying, like in the sense that you really want just a little bit more, but I felt like it was really good in the sense that for a lot of fairy tales, especially the original fairy tales, they weren't satisfying stories. Like they weren't the happily ever after they actually get married into the sunset stories. So I thought it was really appropriate, but I am excited. There's a sequel.
So can you tell us a little bit about publishing or becoming a self-published author? Why don't you tell us a little bit about Thorn and how that got into the traditional publishing sphere?
That was quite an experience. So I I advertised Thorn on a platform called F-BOM, which is just a major kind of newsletter service for people looking for deals on ebooks. And an agent named Emmanuel Morgan picked it up off her F-BOM mailing and read it. And she emailed me and said, I read Thorn and I loved it, and I want to talk to you about traditional publishing, which is, 5 years after I'd given up looking for an agent. It was kind of amazing to hear from her. And we spent probably about a month having multiple phone calls and talking about my writing career and being a hybrid author, meaning being both indie and traditionally published, and what kinds of stories I might bring to traditional publishing, and traditional publishing being the kind of format that does reach most often a wider audience than an indie author can reach on their own, unless you're best-selling, which I'm not. So I ended up signing with her, and we went back and forth about what to do, whether I was bringing an original manuscript to traditional publishing or if she wanted to shop Thorn around for me. And she happened to have lunch with a senior editor over at Harper Teen, and they were talking about a bunch of other authors. But as they were settling down and catching up, Emmanuel mentioned how excited she was to have signed me. And the editor, Amelia, went out and picked up a copy of Thorn on her own and read it and called up Emmanuel and said, I want this book and I want this author. So it was a very non-traditional deal from start to finish. It was very exciting. It was very surreal. But it was also, I feel like, the best step for me. Thorn is a story that it explores the power of a woman to choose her own future when most of her decisions seem made for her. And it also looks at issues of compassion and mercy and justice. And it was a story I wrote around 9/11 and its aftermath. And those were issues that I was really struggling with at the time. And I feel like they're very cogent even now. So it seems like a good story to bring to a wider audience. I'm excited and thankful for the opportunity to do so.
It's just so cool that you got a publishing deal. We were a little disappointed we didn't get to do Thorn, but that is okay. That's okay. It's a very good reason to have to be exclusive with that particular novel.
Thank you.
So let's see. We've got a bunch of questions for you. But I have to ask, since we're still kind of at the end of December, did you participate in NaNoWriMo this year? And if so, how did it go? And did you help cheer on others that you are in your writing circle?
Yeah, I this was the first year in many that I didn't attempt to take part in Nano. It was just, I didn't have any project that I could work on drafting. I had deadlines for my editor at Harper. And I'm also working on the third book in the Sunbolt series, and so I was trying to get that edited as well. And so everything was drafted and just in terrible shape and needed to be fixed. Well, Thorn was in good shape, but Sunbolt 3 was really, truly awful. So I considered being a nano rebel, but I didn't end up going for it because it doesn't usually work as effectively for me. But I did cheer on my friends, and I'm hoping maybe next year I can work it out. It's a fantastic venture.
If you had to, just returning to Sunbolt for a moment, pick up some inspiration or maybe other stories or books you've read that you felt directly inspired Sunbolt, or you felt yourself drawing on when you were writing the story?
I don't know. I think one of the things about writing is you read voraciously and you internalize stories that you don't necessarily realize you've internalized. And then sometimes, I mean, with Sunbolt, I was also writing a story that I wanted to read, that I hadn't found. especially as the story arc progresses. So one of the things that I kind of do in Sunbolt, I don't think this is a spoiler, as I set up some tropes that usually drive me bananas, and I'm planning to subvert them over the course of the story. So it was partly fun for me, but that, you know, that's drawing. Yes, that's drawing on stories that you've read before, but it's not in the usual way per se. So I don't know that I could pinpoint any particular story that influenced it more than any other.
I do know that in the F-BOM forums, there were several people wondering about that romance that was maybe being hinted at.
Yeah.
I think you might end up being disappointed.
My lips are sealed.
Oh,
I have no idea what romance you're talking about.
I think you'll be forgiven.
So are you reading anything now then? Are you always reading something? Are you not reading things because you're too busy editing? What's your process?
I wish I was always reading something. I often do have times when I can't fit it into my life. So I homeschool during the day. I have a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, and they do take a few classes for which I'm deeply grateful, because I'm not a wonder mom who can have them all the time, every day, 24/7. Though I'd take my hat off or my scarf off to those people. But they do go to a few classes during the day, but I'm with them most of the time, and I want to be mentally and emotionally present with them. So I try not to get on my computer or whatever device during that time frame. So I really write at night and in the few hours that they are both at class at the same time. We read a lot of books aloud together, but they're kids' books, and so I've gotten really good at at some point I should take up Kid Lit, because I'm doing a great study of it right now. But I probably only read 2 or 3 books a month, and it's a massive reduction compared to where I was before I have kids. But it's just it's my reality. As they get older, and we can do more family reading time, which I'm hopeful for, I'm sure that'll change. Most recently, I just finished a book by W.R. Goodell. She's an Australian/New Zealand author, and she writes all over the board of speculative fiction. I love her books. And then I also just read another traditionally published book. I can't remember who the author is, but it was called A Pocket Full of Murder, and it's a middle grade fantasy/mystery novel. And it was just grand fun.
It sounds fun?
Yeah.
Funny.
So on the same reading bent then, have you been in, so we call F-BOM a book club. We don't, it's over 3 months. We don't necessarily require anybody to have finished the book or to participate in our forums, but it's still a community of readers. And so I was wondering what book clubs or other reading, or maybe a better question would be writing communities, but what types have you been a part of before F-BOM?
I haven't successfully been a part of a book club before. I made a few failed attempts, but I tend to have great intentions and then realize that I'm only human and can only manage so much. I do a lot better with writing groups because I'm always writing. I don't know I don't know that I have too much more detail to give on that.
No worries. It's not like a pass-fail thing.
Right.
No punishments.
Because otherwise I fail, right?
Is there anything that you wanted to talk about today that we haven't asked you about yet regarding either your works in progress or Thorn or Sunbolt, as it may be?
Not really. I'm trying to think if there's.
You said you were working on the third in the series, correct?
Yes, so I'm working on book 3, and that has been extremely challenging. It ended up being the longest first draft I've ever written. It was 118,000 words. Memories of Ash was a little bit longer than that when I finished it. That's the second book in the Sunbolt series. But it started out at like 60,000 words as a draft. So it grew immensely over the revision process. And I am terrified of this book growing at all. So right now I'm working on revising it, and it's been really interesting because this is a story where, in the first 2 books, Hitomi is out and she's saving herself and others, and that's really her focus. And the others that she's saving are very specific people that she cares about, that she really cares about. In this book, she is healing the burnt lands, which are a kind of cursed area or region that was destroyed by a cataclysmic magical war 400 years ago. And so it's a very different journey for her as she kind of learns to care about lands and peoples that don't directly influence her life. So it's been really interesting to write and also work on getting the right emotional tension because we're not saving anyone we love. So how do you do this? So it's been really neat as a way to challenge me as a writer to write a story that is still going to draw readers in and create a fantastic reading experience while doing something a little different from what I have been doing.
If there was a piece of advice you could give to other aspiring authors for striving for that traditional publishing deal that you just landed, or even for the self-publishing experience and rewards you've gained, what might that advice be?
I think it would be 2 parts. The first would be that you don't have to write every day. There's a lot of advice out there on how to write and when to write and how often to write and whether or not you're going to make it as a writer, dependent on how you follow this advice. And my advice is write in the way that works best for you and your life, but just keep writing. So the second part of it is don't give up. Whatever it is you're doing, write in the way that works for you and don't give up. And you will find, eventually the right opportunities for you. You will find the right readers for you. It takes time. It's not easy. Revision is not easy. Drafting is not easy. And writing as a business is definitely not easy. But I think having that staying power and finding the rhythm of writing that works for you, those are the key elements to my perspective.
Well, thank you so much for that advice. I mean, I'm an inspiring writer, so I'm absorbing every word. And Cecilia has actually published 1 book, and her second's on the way. So yeah. I think we both could stand to get a bit more advice.
Yeah.
Oh,
so could I. So if you have any, share. I think that's the other thing. You're always growing as a writer. You're never stagnant. There's always something that you can improve.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great. Do you have any closing thoughts you want to give to us, Intisar?
I just want to say thank you so much for this opportunity to engage with F-BOM and to be part of what you're doing, and thank you for the interview.
Thank you so much for taking the third time out with us. I think people who tried to watch our first live video know that we had some problems, and so this is a pre-recorded video, which now our audience can enjoy. Celia, is there anything that we should be telling our members as we wrap things up?
Yes, we still have a few more days for our flash fiction contest.
Yes.
We have, I will say that we've been getting a lot of submissions, so we have a lot of competition, which is really exciting. And the contest will close on December 15th, so we still have a few more days. It's a 100-word flash fiction contest, and the topic is Magic Always Has a Price. You can send your entries to submissions@fbom.com. On December 15th, we're going to compile them, we're going to send them to Intisar, and she is going to pick our winners, and we have copies of Memories of Ash, and we have memberships to F-BOM, and we have publication on our blog as prizes.
Super awesome prizes. And if some people watching are not members of F-BOM yet, you can get a coupon code by signing up for our newsletter at f-bom.com. That's fbom.com. And you should sign up very soon if you have been wanting to, because we are only going to be having Sunbolt on the site until December 31st. January 1st at midnight, December 31st, basically New Year's, we will be launching our next author, our first author of 2018. So if you sign up now, you will get a copy of Sunbolt, and then in just a few short weeks, you will get our January first quarter of the year author. So really, it's a win-win. Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. And we look forward to talking with our next F-BOM author next year. Have a happy holidays.